I think why the onboarding works and why a free pilot matters is if you see a product and you say, it's going to tell you what you should do on your business, what parts you should focus on. Should you focus on collections, which properties, who's the best manager, who's not, who's the top performing asset, why is it, right? Like, you don't really care about someone else's portfolio. Like, you don't want to see a demo of someone else's. So I'm always like, just try it. Just install it on your system. It's super easy. And like every piece of freaking dollar we could spend into making it easier to install and integrate with, we have spent. And like we continue to spend.
Okay. Well, welcome to the Digible Dudes Podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reed.
Okay, Reed, we spoke with Sunny from Canopy Analytics.
Formerly Umbrella Analytics.
As you hit him on the episode, you asked him, like, how'd you come up with Canopy? Which, by the way, not too bad of a name. Like, there's
no, it's a great name. I was just like, there's lots of different ways to paint that image.
Yeah.
But the way he did it, and you'll obviously hear it, I thought, sounded inspiring to me.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't as simple, like, because I can sometimes, like, awning and Canopy, like, have too much association with. And I was like, I don't love the idea of awning as the name, Awning Analytics. I just get my brain quickly starts going to like whatever kind of associations. But then when he talked more about like, I think trees and, coverage.
Oh, yeah.
He made it sound more like naturalistic.
Yeah.
And that pulled me in. I was like, now I can really get on board with Canopy.
Even if he wouldn't have had that background, it would have been fine. It's better than many of the other things. Like it's closer related than some of the other things we deal with. You can spell it. I was just doing the count of like umbrella and how many characters that is versus Canopy. And that's a slide aside. I don't know if we've talked about this before, but I think you'd left Super Pages. Was it even Super Pages when you were there at Verizon?
They had just rebranded to Super Pages.
Okay. So I think you weren't there when they bought YP.com, or I think it was YP.com.
I don't remember that.
It was like $12 million. And I remember we're doing mass layoffs and they're like, and we bought YP.com for $12 million. And I was like, what the hell? Like it was not great optics for me. And then also I was like just blown away by like the URL game and what it's worth. And then and now it made me think like, was it worth it? Like, did they, at some point, was someone able to prove the spend on this? Which at a company that size, pulling that revenue, 12 million is not a large amount of money, but it still is like, you got to get a payback on this kind of
totally
investment. But anyways, yeah, so Canopy is a better name than most. So what did we talk about? What's worth listening to?
Well, what they're trying to achieve, and kind of the business model. I think, he's very open about that. He was open about everything. And he was loaded with, we'll call them hot takes or kind of contrarian viewpoints, on the business, meaning, the industry, I should say. So I think that in itself, you should tune in, but he's super sharp guy. And I like the way, he kind of told a story backing into, as most of us have, into the industry, but he's making the most out of the opportunities, having a lot of fun. He's building scale, building, relationships. And, if he gets this right, I think he was open about the goals to ultimately get to that unicorn value. And I think, the vision's certainly big enough to get there. But I had myself a lot of questions, which I appreciate. He didn't dodge a single one of them,
Yeah.
So he answered some tough ones.
And similar to another interview that we had after his, but was recent with Moshe, Moshe very early was asking us like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Like, what's it really, like, what's the outcome? Right. And I feel like Sunny was very focused on that too. He's like, why is BI, like, why do you need BI? Like, aren't you just trying to solve a problem? Make sure that you're being efficient. And he went down interesting discussions to say, is it really BI you want, or you just want the answer? Or like, is it really the answer you want, or do you just want it fixed? Right. And so I just love that he was asking, like, what is the real problem? And maybe this is just a means to an end to get there. And I also love that he's willing to not be contrarian just for contrarian's sake, but he's willing to be contrarian in order to help actually affect change or make change. So he's like, I don't want to just get bought up. I want to do this for the long haul. I'm not transient. Like, he spoke a lot about that. So I love his passion, the way he's approaching it. And I'm excited to follow along.
And he asked us some tough questions, put us on the spot. I don't know if I call them tough, but definitely was curious what our stance was on things like AI. I mean, as you know, I've been talking more and more. I still got to get it scheduled and have Sterling on.
And you answered, is George Bush evil or not?
Yeah, I was kind of hoping
they
wouldn't have brought that up.
They have to get like 50 minutes into the episode in order to get the answer if they want.
That's true. But since you brought it up, I will say I was hopefully tongue in cheek, you know, and there's aspects that felt, you know, evil. I don't even know if this is worth trying to
giving away the tease.
I don't know if
the tease right now. No, okay.
I don't even know if this is worth explaining. So yeah, I guess listen in.
Yeah. And next time you catch Reed with like a drink in his hand, then you can ask him more about that.
Yeah, I'll clarify.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, we had a lot of fun with Sunny, so stay tuned. All right, well, here we go. We're here with Sunny. Sunny, go ahead and tell us who you are. Introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sunny Juneja. I'm the CEO of Canopy Analytics. I run a company. What we do is we're AI for real estate data. What we find is people use manual reports and BI, and nobody ever looks at it. They just end up doing a lot of manual reporting, and our system goes through all of your data, tells you exactly what you have to do, and then creates tasks for your sys team to do it, and makes you a lot of money.
That's your elevator pitch?
That is my elevator pitch. Lots of money.
Somebody asked me for my elevator pitch the other day, Reed, and I sort of like I was like, oh shoot, it's been a while. Let's dust this sucker off. That's funny. Sunny, when you say tells you what to do, is it limited to a particular function or like aspect of property management?
It pulls every bit of operational and financial data that you've ever produced in the history of that property. And it's looking at your leases, your finances, your invoices, charges, everything, security deposits, work orders. There's not a piece of data you produce that I don't look at. Even emails and texts you send to residents, although don't really do much with that. Don't really pull that very much. I cut that part. Never mind. Anyways, just kidding. And what we do is we create a holistic model of like, here's how your property is historically performed. Here's what's normal. Here's what's good. And then like, here's where we think it should be based on its actual performance.
Okay. So I'd say probably more operational, but it sounds like there's like sort of like aspects of Canopy that touch the entire org.
Yeah, I think one good example that people really like is like we produce all this reporting for occupancy and marketing and leasing, okay? But what we actually do is we say like, okay, it's the middle of the month. Here's how many tours you look like you're going to get based on last month and this month's, right? Here's how many tours you need to hit your occupancy goal, which you've already entered in Canopy, right? And like based on if you're on track or not, we're going to warn you. And then we're also going to say, okay, here's all the marketing sources you're spending in your marketing ledger. Which is producing the most number of leads? Maybe where should you go to spend more money? I would say it doesn't get much more advanced than that, but that's usually pretty good for most people.
That's awesome. Well, let's back up a second. Sunny, how did you get to start Canopy and why Canopy?
I'm really passionate about real estate, kind of by accident. I think everybody who gets into multifamily, it's totally by mistake. And I dropped out of college to like start a company in 2009 that helped people avoid foreclosure during the great financial crisis. And it wasn't a tech company, but like we partnered with a CRM. We did all this stuff that made us really efficient and a really successful business. And I was like, real estate and tech, there's some sort of white space. So I went back to school, taught myself to code, and kind of always had this desire and want to do something in that space. And originally I was going to do a single family property management company, but kind of screwed that one up. And then I met an asset manager and talked to 100 more of them before really figuring out what I want to do with Canopy.
Got it. Yeah. Well, that's the way you answered that is exactly how Reed answers it in interviews. They're like, hey, Reed, tell me about your career. And he says, it was a mistake. Thank you, Sonny. Thank you. Usually Reed, I'll get some chuckles from him. Not
best
today.
Mistake I ever made.
Right. Yeah. Best mistake. There you go. All right, Reed, I'll let you ask a few questions for Sonny because I know we were doing some stuff offline.
Yeah, well, he did just as that last piece of talk to 100 other asset managers. I was wondering who is using that tool, and it doesn't sound like, I mean, there's plenty of asset managers out there, but I wanted to dig in a little more. And I think I started this with you in Philadelphia, to compartmentalize just the business model to the extent that you're willing to share. Because a lot of companies have produced AI driven insights and analytics, and they not all, but often find out that that's very difficult to build a company or drive revenue without, which I appreciate, you didn't stop short there of the actual tasks, the insights, but, things that are actionable. Even then, that can be difficult if you're not able to perform the task in the platform. So a delegation tool, also can be difficult. So I'm curious to hear you unpack a little bit more of the business model, the theory, who's using it, and what traction really looks like. So I should probably stop there, but I have to just say, when you introduced it as an AI tool for real estate, that's obviously very general, but I see it as an NOI tool based on the part where you're like, and you can make a lot of money. So is it in fact an NOI tool that is fueled by AI and extraordinary capabilities with analytics? Or would you still say this is an AI tool that helps with your analytics and gives you all the information you need to make much better decisions? And then the outcome is you should make a lot more money. Or would you flip it the way I was saying and say this is actually an NOI tool that's fueled by all these amazing capabilities?
Couple of questions there for sure, but I think I want to address your first question, which is it really hard? And I say yes, it's extremely challenging. I think convincing people that like software can make a meaningful difference in your business is really, really hard. And I think, what you're kind of getting to is like, how close is it to revenue? How can you really show that impact? And how do you connect it to your software? And I think all those things are really hard. And like, there's not one clear answer, but just to get started, like, how do I think of our clients, right? The people who buy Canopy are typically COOs and VPs of asset management or operations. And I think what they've identified is that they know there's a problem with their business. They can say like, I know there's places for operations to improve. And like, one of the things that really caught me by surprise was I said earlier that I'm from the Bay Area for the last 10 years. I've moved back to LA, but I live in the Bay Area. No Bay Area landlord wanted to work with us before COVID. And it's because like, I don't care what software you have, like every year our rents go up, or we have a line out the building. We have more applicants than we can count. Like the stack just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And like, those are not great clients of Canopy because they don't see the upside on focusing on their operations, right? So I think just who buys Canopy, right? Now, who uses Canopy? Like if Canopy's promise is to tell you how is your business performing and why, and can point you very directly, it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling theory, right? Like your COO is like, oh my God, this is awesome. And then they say, I want you to look at it, VPs. And their VPs are like, oh my God, this is awesome. Like, I want you to look at it, regionals. And your regionals are like, oh my God, this is awesome. And then your site team is like, go look at it, right? And I think the quintessential question for most people, or I think a theory I have, something I feel strongly about, is that a property's performance is obviously driven by the market. But the second most important thing is the people who work there, right? Like your property manager, regional manager. And when I thought about Canopy, I will never say we are the most advanced analytics tool. We do not have the prettiest charts and graphs, but we have the tool that is most easy for property managers and regional managers to use and most effective for change for them. And I think by accident, I will not claim to be this super clairvoyant person. We did make them do the tasks in Canopy because it just felt like the right thing to do. Like if you can get them to come to the system and use it, and like the promise for us to them is like, you never have to do a manual report again. You never have to fill out an Excel and send it to somebody else. We'll take all this work off your plate. And the thank you we get is thank you for getting corporate off our back, because they know that they've done a good job. They can see the task they completed. They can check the performance, and they don't have to look at a report that they hopefully find or don't find something in. Did I answer some of your questions, Reed? I feel like you had like 7 there. So there's a lot more we could have unpacked.
Yeah, I may have had 8, but no, that definitely helps a lot. I was assuming up front that maybe the primary user was going to be corporate, but it sounds it's just the opposite. Maybe your in is with the asset manager or the operator, as you said, COO or asset manager, VP of operations, but the person that's in the tool is, I don't know if it's a daily or if it's, a few times a month, but you're actually the interfaces and design is really built for the property manager.
Kind of both. You have to do both, but I would say if I was going to pick one, and I would say to the detriment of our sales, I pick the property manager and regional manager because I do think that makes them more money in the long run. And I think that's like the kind of line I've driven is like, I would always rather be easier to use than more complicated, because that drives the value for us at least.
Is it too early to say you have a sweet spot or identified a sweet spot? Because we found sometimes with tools like this, especially if there's a lot of, I'll say, workflow or operational elements to it, that third party can be difficult in comparison to the owned and operated, that move a little bit faster, can disseminate change or affect change quicker, right? Versus you have all these different ownership groups, all these different stacks. Or would you say that it's indiscriminate and that there is no sweet spot, or there is no ideal between third party versus owned and operated?
Yeah, I think it's important you ask that question, because I think anyone who says there is no sweet spot is like, doesn't understand their business very well. And like, you can never make everyone happy, right? No man can have, 100 masters, right? And so I think where we found the most kind of critical mass is people who own or manage between 2 and 25,000 units. I think as you get bigger than that, you have so many more decision makers, you have so many more stakeholders. You do have a technical CTO, you have a VP of IT, they have 5 or 7 analysts. They need to be able to like rip it open and write 70,000 BI queries or whatever. And like those people are probably better served by like a more complicated solution, if you will. And we're trying to satisfy them too, because like you have to kind of sell to everybody at some point. But I think the thing that's important is like you need to have a very different pitch for an owner, a property manager, and an owner operator. And for the owner, the pitch is you have 3 different you have 8,000 units, you have 13 different management companies. Just figuring out the most basic metric is a huge pain. We combine that all together and give it to you in one single data stream. Okay. And then you can choose which property managers you want to onboard, which one you don't. That's kind of one. For the property manager, it's like you have 100 different owners. Every building is essentially a different owner. We will handle 100% of the reporting end to end. Like you don't, even a manual request that comes through the system will come to us. We'll handle it for reporting. And then for the owner operator, which is the one that like is the most fun for us. I'm not going to say it's the fastest growing or the best or whatever, but like they're the ones, because they control both the ownership and the operations, they're the ones who really lean into performance management, and we see the biggest results, to be honest.
And go ahead, David.
Well, that's all right. I'll let you finish your train of thought, but I like the way he's thinking about it and segmenting, and also the performance management aspect.
Yeah, well, I'll for the sake of some level of efficiency here, just come back to that other question that you seem to have questions about. But do you think you'd be better? And maybe that's a wrong way of putting this, because I don't want you to be like, well, I already thought of that, and the answer is obviously no. But is it not better positioned as an NOI tool?
Oh yeah, I think that's great. I think the hardest thing I've had about Canopy is talking about it. Like when I first started the company, I'm from outside of real estate. I sat in a real estate company operator's office for a year and a half. Like we built it hand in hand. Like I made sure the property managers could use it, right? And I was like, I know this is good. I don't know enough about your world. Let me just show you the software. People always tell me to talk about the product, and I was like, I don't know what to say to you. I have no clue. Like, it does so many things. It seems to work. Like these customers seem happy. Like, would you just try like logging in and like clicking around for me? And like the first early days of sales were really hard because I had no idea what I was saying. And just to be honest, and like, I think of the business as like an NOI and performance tool. But like, if I told the customer like this is an NOI tool, they're going to turn around and say, okay, you and every other company, like my utility billing company says they're an NOI tool. My resident experience company says they're an NOI tool. And it's hard for companies to articulate their ROI. And like, we've kind of like had to like, I'll kind of get into this a little bit if you don't mind. It's a slight tangent, but slight not, is like, I think if I was to come up to you and I said, Reed, I know everything about your business. We're going to make you $1 million more in EBITDA. You'd be like, okay, so how the hell are you going to do that? Right. And you might just hang up on me. Okay. But one thing that's cool about our tool is because we have all your data, I say, try a free pilot. And it was a huge pain to get a free pilot going. But I can go specifically and say, like, here's your portfolio. About a third of it has a big collections issue. And I think of that collections amount, half of it can be fixed by process. And the other half, you have to get out these bad evictions. Like you just have to deal with that on your own. Right. and I can say, here's the exact dollar amount I think your business can make after using Canopy. That's really effective. And we're trying to get better at doing that. And I think like the category, like just being honest, like because we use AI and because AI is a sexy kind of like thing right now, it's easier to use that as a 2-word category. But I don't love it. Like what we did this year and what we did before OpenAI hasn't changed dramatically, but the way we talk about it has, because that seems to be resonating with the market. People are looking for solutions that do things like AI to them means less people, less change management, more automated systems, and they hope that increases the NOI is what I think. But did I dodge your question, Reed, or did I actually answer?
No, I think you answered it, but I would argue there's more people right now saying we have an AI tool for real estate than there are people talking about NOI tools. But I don't disagree that there's plenty of companies in tech that are promoting NOI as the ultimate like outcome of their software or technology. So I agree with you. It's not even about agreeing. I am understanding, and now I also understand why the name is Canopy. It could have been Umbrella, but I do think you have a challenge in front of you though, using Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. But like one of the things he advocates for is niche, niche, niche. Like you start a business, go 3 deep. Get into a vertical, and then sub vertical, and then specific audience. So it seems like you are bringing something with a tremendous amount of horsepower, a ton of different applications, with the ultimate upside of bringing a lot more money to an asset manager or to a property. And that's not easy, right, in this day and age, for somebody to hear and say, oh, that's what you are, that's what you do. Instead, it's like this really big promise. And that's what I'm wondering how you're going to like kind of, I guess, crystallize things, or find that product market fit, given that you have what sounds like so many different avenues to solving some really big problems. So that's just my initial take hearing you talk through it.
Yeah, and I think by the way, love 0 to 1. I think there's a lot of earned secrets we picked up with Canopy, and like I think there's a lot of things that like we understand with the market that don't. And I think what's worth saying is like we are very niched. Like I think firstly, multifamily, we had the opportunity to pick all commercial real estate, and we looked at a lot of different asset classes, and we chose multifamily, right? And then even then, you can subdivide multifamily into SMB, mid market, and super enterprise. And we said we're going to do just the mid market, right? And then honestly, we only worked for owner operators. I actually turned away property managers and owners for the first 2 years of the business. I just said, we can't work with you. Like you have too many data problems. Like there's 0% chance we could do that. So we kind of did that. And I think the reality about like making come with someone money is every portfolio is different, and how they want to report on it is different, and how they want to look at their specific metrics are different. And that's where we went really wide. And like we're not a Happy Co. We don't replace Happy Co. We're not a replacement for Funnel CRM, right? Where we are is like there are so many workflows that happen with reporting and workflows and decision making and kind of communication and collaboration that all have to happen in one place. And like how you look at your business, like student living or student housing versus conventional versus military, they're all so different. And we said like we will give you the ability to customize the data and the metrics, and we will be able to run very complicated analysis on it, and we're able to do it on every type of data. That's where we went wide. Does that make sense?
Yep. I want to come back to the onboarding, but David, I'll let you pick up here.
Well, I love you dropped a nugget a little bit back, Sunny, about hey, even if there's a manual report request that comes in, we'll handle it. So are you guys built by nature to have like your whatever your pricing model is, it automatically is like truly takes over all reporting, and now you guys become like the go-to resource for reporting at a management company?
Yeah, I think one thing that's hard, and kind of just going back to Reed's point about finding product market fit, is like you have to both like follow the market, but also skate where it's going. And I think we did a really good job of like going where the puck is going for a long time, and now we're kind of focused more on like what do they actually have a budget for today. And so like our kind of core innovation was like two things. One was like how do you transform multiple property management systems into one data? Like we have a schema, we have this thing where we can map any PMS to the same one, and we can pull every bit of data from them. And like every PMS, how we get data out is completely different. But the one thing that's true is we get a ton of data outside from it. Okay. Like more than any company. And I would say we're the most integrated of any business with the system. Right. And I think there's a lot of budget and people seeking solutions saying like, hey, we were looking for a reporting tool. We're looking for a BI tool. And we kind of get there. But immediately where I kind of follow people is like, BI is not an old concept. Rentlytics existed like more than 8 years ago. Rentlytics was bought by RealPage for $60 million. People still have this problem. And I think people now are starting to appreciate that, like, most people say, like, I want to buy a pretty chart and graph. Like, that's what I want to purchase, right? And then if they do that and they go through that process, they're actually like, that's not what I needed. I needed someone to use this tool. I needed someone to look at it. I needed someone to, like, pull out all the critical nuggets and then, like, do something about it. And that's what Canopy is really good at. It's kind of the alerts and, like, a simple task management as well as reporting.
I totally agree with you. I mean, the amount of times in our own business that our team has said, we need like Tableau or Looker or whatever to do X, Y. And I'm like, those are a means to an end. What are you really solving?
Yeah.
Right? Like if you just give pretty charts and graphs or ugly charts and graphs, it doesn't matter, right? It's like, what outcome do you want? And so I just want the insights. I don't really care about the charts and graphs, right? Because then I have to look at the charts and graphs and determine an insight, right? So yeah, so it sounds like, yes, you have some level of service layered on top of the reporting aspect.
Yeah, and I think, like, just taking it one step further, like, you want a chart and graph, you want someone to analyze it, and then you will have to pick up the phone and call somebody and say, here's the outcome or task I think we need to do in order to complete it. And then you also have to say, like, hey, a week later, did you do it? Did you do it? Did you remember to do this? And those are some of the things that Canopy is really good at, because we have a system that says, like, here's a reminder, here's a completion. And, like, one thing I want to remind people is, like, multifamily is not hard. People say this all the time. Managing apartments isn't complicated. It's chopping wood. You have to do the simple things well, right? Like, when work orders are open too long, you need someone to go and say, like, go hire maintenance staff, go talk to somebody and get them off their ass, like, whatever you have to do, right? And I think that's really important.
I also, again, align with you. So what's the long-term vision? Like you mentioned Rentlytics, like for those that are familiar with Rentlytics versus Canopy, what is different of what you guys are doing versus what they did? What does this look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference we've made with, like, Rentlytics and then the BI products offered by the big PMSs and also, like, some of our kind of new competitors is, like, we spent a lot more time building our product. Like, we spent a lot more time saying, and it sucked. It sucks to, like, go to a real estate company, have them pay you very little money, and, like, have one customer for a year and a half, and, like, really build something that works. And, like, what that meant for us was, like, we have the most amount of data, we have the biggest, deepest integration, we have, like, most number of workflows, and, like, we do charts, we do graphs, we do pretty reports, but, like, these alerts and this communication and these tasks and all that is where I think the big difference is. And, like, I think the way I think about my business is, like, the core innovation we built was this ETL and this common data schema that can, it's like we're a property management system almost, not really, like, we don't do anything on the front end, but, like, we have all the data there, right? And, like, do we need another Yardi? Do we need another Entrada? Probably not. Like, people, those companies are huge. Like, people don't want to change out their solutions. And, like, there's so many people who use all three of them because they're owners and they're completely underserved, right? So, like, my vision of Canopy is that we have the biggest index of, like, properly audited data. And this is going to sound crazy. And this may get, like, 50 of half your viewers to be like, shut up, Sunny. Like, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Half our 7 viewers are going to be pissed.
Yeah, exactly. 3 of the viewers are going to write the demand letters and say, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But I think that data is really valuable for budgeting, forecasting, revenue management, all that stuff, right? But I also think the natural inclination is, like, what are the opportunities we have for fintech? Like, how can I help the best operators get a better understanding, like a better interest rate, right? How do I say this operator is so strong at what they're doing that they can, like they should see some sort of financial upside in the terms of their agreements, right? Like, how can I help them show a better performa, right? Like, I'm very interested in fintech and the payment side of stuff, like, in terms of vendor payments, but, like, that's 10 years out. It's hard to say, but, I think one thing that's different about me is, like, I came into tech, like, Proptech, like, accidentally, and I want to stay in it. I think that's the biggest difference. Like, I think a lot of people come into it accidentally and they're like, well, let me sell my company RealPage for $50 million or whatever, right? And I think, like, a life that is well measured is one where you, like, build something enduring that matters and that impacts people positively. And housing is, like, the number one thing of our time. And, like, how do you make a positive impact there? Like, how do you drive costs down so rents can be lower and you can get more construction and more projects pencil? And so, like, for me, I really want to build a company that can last for more than 10 years.
Yeah, well, we've read a lot of the same books. Reed, I saw you tried to jump in there. Go for it.
No, I just get a kick out of like, I appreciate what you're saying, Sunny, and we feel the same way as far as making a difference and an impact and trying to build an enduring company. But then with the tagline, this is an NOI performance tool. But I'm not saying you can't do that, in parallel, but there's a bit of a conflict there, at least in how it sounds. But
You forgot the end of that statement, though,
what's
Reed.
that?
NOI performance tool, comma, it was a mistake.
Oh, right. That's great. Yeah. I think it was more about another book. We'll see if you scanned this one or read this one too. But Hooked. Does that ring a bell, Sonny?
Yeah, it's the how to build addicting products.
Yeah. So I was just wondering,
me-
would you classify right now Canopy as more of a painkiller or a vitamin, or both?
I first, I can't remember the book. I read it actually. I pre-ordered that book and I read it when it came out, so it's been more than 10 years. So I'm like trying to track back about like what was the core thesis and theme of that book. I think I think the painkiller and vitamin thing is a little weird of a question, because like vitamins are like a multi-billion-dollar industry, and like you could say that some people like their life is improved. Like, maybe you say this like this NOI spreadsheet thing. The way I think about it is like spreadsheets run the world. Like, you could not run a business without a spreadsheet. I think Excel is a humanitarian positive thing. I will stand by that. Okay. Maybe you don't feel that way, but like, this matters, right? Like, you lose a lot of quarters in the couch. Someone's got to pick them up and like make sure we can buy food with them, right? And so like, I will stand by that. My efficiency software is great. But I think one of the hard things about our product is that like, you have to educate the customer a lot, and like, they don't totally get how they should be using their data and how they should be thinking about it. And they have a very established model of like, I want to get a data warehouse. I want to put Power BI on it. I know this is what Avalon Bay does. I know this is what Essek does. Like, I want to do the same thing, right? And the way I think about our product and our company is like, no, what you want to do is you want to make more money. And like, our software is a generic property management tool that sits on top of your PMS that really finds all the inefficiencies and makes your team work on them. Okay. And like, do I think that it's I mean, it's a real pain. I mean, look, half the industry is like underwater on their debt and trying to find ways to squeeze more dollars. So like, I would say Canopy is more needed than ever, but I'm also the person who runs the company. I'll make a lot of money if it's successful. So don't listen.
It's a pain-killing vitamin, is what I hear.
Yeah,
I'm gathering that too. I was going to ask, if I were to call up your last customer that you signed up and said, scale of 1 to 10, how's the onboarding? What do you think they would rate it?
25. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. Here's something like, I liked working in tech. I think I brought a lot of good tech stuff over from tech here. And I think we do things a little bit differently. Okay. First thing, we just hired the CRO. The CRO's had 12 years in the industry. And the first thing he said is, I hate that you do free pilots. We're going to kill that. Okay. And then 2 weeks later, he's been on like 5 sales meetings a day. He's heard the pitch. He's seen it, whatever. He's like, we're keeping the free pilots. Like, we're definitely not getting rid of them. Okay. And so I think why the onboarding works and why a free pilot matters is if you see a product and you say, it's going to tell you what you should do on your business, what parts you should focus on. Should you focus on collections, which properties, who's the best manager, who's not, who's the top performing asset, why is it, right? Like, you don't really care about someone else's portfolio. Like, you don't want to see a demo of someone else's. So I'm always like, just try it. Just install it on your system. It's super easy. And like, every piece of freaking dollar we could spend into making it easier to install and integrate with, we have spent. And like, we continue to spend. Okay. So like, now I turn on Canopy, the first thing they're going to say is look at the data and say like, wait, that can't be real. That can't be right. And I'm like, no, yeah, you are spending way more than you expected on water sewer in Washington. Like that's very, very real. And they're like, no, this data is inaccurate. Like, everyone sucks at integrating PMSs. And I say, okay, here's the 7 reports you have to run in your PMS and cross-list the data and tell me if it's the same. And they do. And it's very impactful. And it's very powerful. And then they buy into the idea that this might be something useful to them. And then I say, okay, go find one of your regional managers and just have them and their properties use it, and no double work. Like, you can't do any more manual reports. We'll do all the heavy lifting. of taking the existing process and mapping it into Canopy, okay? Because it's flexible, it's easy. And they're like, okay, we'll try it, we'll see it, okay? They see it, they do it, they're like, this worked pretty good. I can see the NOI number went up a little bit, right? And it's like, yeah, it definitely went up, right? And, our product is not useful unless people use it. And if people don't feel like they know how to use it, if it doesn't feel easy to use, if it doesn't, there's so many places where it can have hiccups. If it's not perfect, like, it's hard. And I think, like, we have 10 people in our company and 9 people work on engineering and product specifically to make it easy to onboard. Not just like, hey, let's get a CSM, let's manually do everything, but like the number of tickets we deliver is like 50 or 60 a week, and like 30 of them are features and 20 of them are like how to make it easier to use, right? And like, I think you have to invest in that in this industry, but like, I don't know.
Well,
you don't believe me. It's,
two follow-ups to the onboarding question, and this does, I guess, connect with our own experience with our marketing platform. But two things that we didn't account for up front that were great learnings for us that I feel like are applicable here with what you're describing is, what are the goals of that property? And so in marketing, it's, believe it or not, it's not always just number of leads. Sometimes it's quality of leads, sometimes it's NOI, sometimes it's occupancy. Not all of those for us would mean the same strategy. Hence, the technology is going to give you a different answer based on what those goals are. The second part was, we also used, I'm assuming, I don't know if it's GPT, but like natural language to demystify the black box and actually help them know, what it's saying and what to really do. But we found out that we were overwhelming people, as we were constant. The tool was like, you need to do these 8 things. And then tomorrow it was like, now there's 7 more things on your list. So I'm just, with a Canopy and with as much horsepower, keep using that as this platform has. Have you bumped into that? So first question is there any kind of inputs up front when somebody's onboarding to tell the platform, hey, my goal isn't NOI. This is a short hold, it's 2 years, and I want to maximize the value of the asset so that I can flip it or sell it. Or is there not, I guess, the optionality of like my own inputs from a goal standpoint? And then part 2 is, have you bumped into any scenarios with property managers, asset managers that have been overwhelmed by the amount of, I guess, task and I'll call it value that's coming to them each day or each month?
Yeah, I think information overload is the problem we solve. And I think information overload is kind of where you end up when you start. And like, let's just take a step back and talk about like an asset manager's real life, okay? You have a property, it produces a monthly report that is like 300 pages, 200 of GL, 100 of like other reports, okay? And then they have 12, 14 different properties they're managing. And their expectation is that they need to get a daily report on the worst performing assets, a weekly report from all their assets, and a monthly report for all their assets, right? And call this the lack of value and the lack of information they're being overwhelmed by is extremely massive, okay? And so I think where Canopy comes in is like, firstly, like I have like a internal rule for our company that like the product can't produce like more than 3 alerts per week per user, okay? Like any more of that, just like, it's just so much. And like also like everything moves at a glacier's pace, right? Like an invoice is issued in like October 1st, it's paid in like December 31st, right? Like there's just this huge lag. And so like you need to identify things early that are impactful and you need to rank them. So that's been a big part of our product, is ranking and reducing the amount of information, right? Like my goal is that a customer trusts the system to be on autopilot and looking at the data for them. And it shows them enough high important things that they feel like the things it's showing them matters. And I don't need to worry about everything else. So like, I think that's kind of like a philosophy of how the product came to be. And then in terms like, how do you customize it to this specific property's goals? I think we're okay at it. I think we could be better, right? Like once again, kind of like you said, like niching, like we are trying to be NOI maximization. Like if you are trying to, like you can set your occupancy goal to be 100%. And maybe you're doing that because you want to really ramp the cash flow because you're going to do a refinance. Okay. Like there's there's like, call it like levers that you can do like that. Hacks. But I would say that it's so far that hasn't come up. And I think it's important in the long run, but like we haven't had the bandwidth yet to solve that problem. But you're right. You're 100% on that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Sonny, there's a few things that I want to make sure I get to. So, but one of them was before we started talking, I was asking you about just like what are the goals of Canopy, and you said to become. I think the word you used was massive and not get out too early, which you also kind of referenced here during the recording, where you said you didn't want to, like a lot of the other folks have been more transient into the space and almost by design, versus you want to stick around. So, would you just expand on that? Like, what does massive mean to you? Why are you saying that you want to stick around longer than others?
I want to tell a story if that's okay. So I have a couple friends who've had exits, okay, and they all sold their company for a ton of money and they made a lot of money, and they made a life changing amount of money where they don't need to work again. And many of them look back and thought like, I'll just do another startup. But the idea of like, it's first getting one startup off the ground is so hard, okay, and then like you kind of become addicted to the comforts of your own life, and like you have such a high bar because you were already successful. And I think this idea of a repeat entrepreneur, like it's even a higher breed of person that like you have to be like not just a workhorse, but you have to be a psychopathic workhorse, right? Like you have to be like super crazy, and like those people exist, and respectable. I don't know if I'm that person, so I love my job. I like it. It's been the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. I'm a little bit of a work to live kind of person than a live to work, or I don't know, the one where you like working a lot. Like that's kind of what I am. And like I think a lot of people get in this trap where they're like, I'm going to do this in 5 years. And, I'm trying to do all the things I want to do in 5 years today. And one of those things is I want to build a company that like employs lots of people, that pays those people well, that has customers that use the product and are happy with it, and like has meaningful relationships with those people, and like affects a part of the economy that matters. And like I worked so hard to get the company at this point, and we're barely getting off the ground. And if I had to do all that again to get to like the same place, like that sounds horrible. And so like stick with what you've got. Like, am I never going to sell the company ever? I mean, who knows, right? Like that can't be it. But like it took so much effort to learn this industry, like, and like do all this, and there's so many sleepless nights, and like I just things. If you keep, I think if you keep working on something and you make people happy, like it gets bigger and better, and like that's probably irrational, but it's a good way to live, and so I live by that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it speaks to me, but Reed, I'm curious to get, do you have any holes to poke in his balloon?
Yeah, Reed, are you waiting for private equity checks to come in on Digible? Is that what you're going to say?
I've been waiting for seven and a half years. I thought after the first week, no, it totally connects, and I think it's great that you're in the industry, and it seems like I don't know if the ratio is what it used to be or if it's getting better, but as far as founders and CEOs bringing companies that have, I guess, that stick to itness or stamina, and want to be around, 10 years from now. So it is difficult with the amount of cash, that's thrown obviously at founders. And in this space, that's been happening quite a bit over the last 10 years. It seems to maybe slow down a bit. The thing that I think is interesting, and I'd just be curious to get your take on this, Sonny, because, I know I'm going to get an opinion here. But is RealPage good for the industry or bad for the industry as it relates to acquisitions? And I am going to, I don't know if it's a qualifier, but just I think when we talked to Sina, the CEO of Apply, I posed this to him and he hadn't thought of it this way. So maybe you haven't either, but there's a challenge that the industry faces when you have this monsoon. I'm moving from tsunami, David, to monsoon of technology hitting a niche, multifamily real estate, and how they can absorb that, process it, test it, and make use of it. And so the argument potentially for RealPage being good and acquiring a lot of these companies and people selling is that they do their own kind of selection within that tech, right, and decide what they're going to keep, what they're going to bolt on. And yes, there are cases of them just stamping out an up and comer, which is not the good part. But if there's too much tech proliferation, that can actually have a unintended impact sometimes, I think, of paralyzing or slowing down an industry at large, because I know we're talking kind of meta and macro here. So I'm curious, and I'm just using RealPage as the easy example, but when you mention we don't really need third or fourth, like, to Entrata, Yardi, and RealPage. Is that part of your thinking? How do you see it as it relates to the proliferation of technology, AI tools in multifamily real estate compared to like the big giant prop techs?
Yeah, I think, okay, a lot of interesting thoughts to have there. But I think one thing I want to tell you, I'll tell you a story again, okay? As many people in college was a bleeding heart liberal, okay? And I would talk to my roommate, and I would constantly ask him this question, and it would bring him to such anger. And I would say, is George Bush evil? And I wasn't implying that he was or wasn't, but I forced him into this box, and I was like, you must answer me. And he's like, what does that even mean? Like, what is evil? Like, and I would like, we just like, stay up all night, not really, but like, just shooting the shit. And like, I would harass him about this topic as like a kind of fun game to play with him, right? Because I really loved getting a notion out of him, and he hated to say this. And I think there was something to what he was saying. And I think that like, we live in an ecosystem, and like the ecosystem is what it is, right? And like, there's like a natural balance, like a supply and demand curve, like match, right? And the real reason RealPage exists is that, and they made 27 acquisitions since like, I think in 2012, since their like initial founding or whatever. And like the reason they exist is people want an integrated solution that has a bunch of best of breed products under one umbrella, right? And like some number of people have all agreed that, let's call it like $10 billion worth of revenue. Well, people have all agreed that's what they want, right? So like, is it good or bad for the industry? It doesn't matter to us. Like that's what people want, and that's what exists for that reason, right? And it allows people to pick a solution like Yardi, which is like the best at enterprise and like accounting and the most customizable, and like you can dig and you could build like a Salesforce equivalent on like Yardi. Yardi is essentially the Salesforce or Oracle of our modern prop tech world, right? And Entrata could be the most modern and marketing focused or whatever, right? And like they all kind of satisfy their own needs. But like I will say, I think the prop tech system is overfunded right now. I think if you think about it, like even though real estate is a $15 trillion industry across all CRE, like a very small percent of that is spent on software sales. Majority of that is just like cash flow and asset value. And like we have like many industries are like this, where you have an oligopoly of like 3 or 4 major companies, and you have all these kind of smaller companies that come through that, right? And kind of going back to your previous question is like, how big do you want this thing to be? I want this to be $1 billion company. Like that's what my goal is, right? And it's stupid. And saying that should immediately set off alarms for anyone, because it's an idiotic thing that you can believe that you can get to. It's just, if you really understand what that means, it's really hard, right? But like, maybe because I'm an idiot. So one of the reasons I started a company was people said it will be one of the hardest things you can do. And I was like, I love hard things. I love pushing myself, I'm going to do it. And like, now I look back, I'm like, you're an idiot. You should have like got a job. You should have done something like with your life, you fool. But I think that like those companies exist for a reason. I don't think they are inhibiting or hurting the ecosystem, except when like, I don't think it's great if you stamp out a competitor that has a better product by cutting them off. But like, also like the companies have allowed this, like there's SIP, there's the RealPage API, Entrata has an API, right? Like they also understand that they have a role in the ecosystem, and they may not want the role and they may not like it, but they've adapted to it and they've become the central hub and like done that. And like, I would like to be a company that, is successful and as large as them, but doesn't need to compete with them, right? Like, why do we need 5 accounting systems? Like there's 3 that people have seemed to like. Let's go with that, right? How can I like, and I want to be really specific about my vision here, okay? I want to say I offer you like, X 100 bips point across like the interest rate so that you can have the maximally performing asset. I'm going to give you preferred lending. I want to do deals with our customers. Actually, that's my dream. I want our company to be like, damn, you're a great performer. You use the software so good. Here's $100 million fund. Like, like go run with it. Like figure it out, right? Like to me, that's exciting. And that is like a big business that you can build if you're so focused on performance management and NOI. And like, why lean into that instead of leaning into this? Like, you can't just zig. You have to zag when people are zigging, and everyone is like trying to become the next PMS. And I'm like, why? Back to the Peter Thiel thing. There's too many competitors in this space. They're going to hack you to death. Like, what is your unique competitive advantage? And ours is quality of data, the amount of data, the insights on the data, the ability to act on that. Like, we should keep leaning into that part of the business.
Reed, we usually ask for a hot take, but I think we got like 7 of them. So no, I don't know. Can we back up for a second, Sunny, to your Proptech is overfunded? I think that is so interesting because most VCs are saying it's underfunded. I'm not taking a stance on this. Is kind of like George Bush, good or bad. So tell me
I'll
more
take a
on this.
stance. He is evil, or he was.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, firstly, if you're an investor in a VC, close your ears, send your checks to Canopy. We're raising a Series A next year. Get in touch. I'm a great businessman, blah, 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 blah. But like putting that aside for just a minute, I think if you go to Optech this last year, there was more vendors than owners. Okay. And if you go to a conference and your job is to close customers, you're not competing against, Canopy is not competing against BI product A and B. They are, but we're also competing against the attention and time of them doing 3 software solutions a year and being one of them. So a trade show, even if you're the only analytics products, is extremely competitive. There's 50 other people they can like go spend their hard-earned dollars on, right? And if there's more like vendors than operators, you have a huge issue here. And I think one of the things that's hard for an owner operator and an owner and a PM, and like where I have to really resonate with them, is if you're a vendor, you feel it's so hard to break into this industry and sell in this industry because you can't get a second of people's attention, right? And on the other side, if you're a operator, you feel that you're constantly inundated. Like you guys went to NAA, we all went to NAA, right? Were you guys on the attendee list?
Yeah.
Okay. How many emails did you get from NAA or from other vendors?
Well, here's the trick, Sonny. I don't look at my email, so I don't know. I heard a lot. I heard that there were a lot of emails that came through, but I don't check my email.
Okay. NAA was more than a week ago, right? Like it was not last Friday, but the Friday before, right?
Yeah.
I'm still getting NAA follow-up emails for people saying, "Hey, it was great for you to come to your booth." I never left my booth. I lived there. I held up a big sign that said "Come see Canopy." I did not come to your booth, and I get like 20 of those a day still, and I'm like, Jesus Christ. And so like, if you're an operator, like you have to like sift through so much, and like you've got companies selling flooring, you've got this guy who's saying I sell AI prop performance NOI management, and then you're like, what the fuck? And so I think people tend to have very limited technology and buying decisions because they feel so overwhelmed. And I think a lot of, call it like, incumbent technologies and well-known people become successful as a result of that. Like there is definitely a correlation with how long you've been in prop tech and like how much like pipeline you can generate pretty clearly, right? And like so I do think in that sense that it's a little overfunded. Like should operators spend more on technology and will it improve their overall NOI? I feel very strongly about that. I think RealPage, before they went private, had in their like public investor presentation a TAM slide for every single one, and I think they estimated around like $500, and they had captured like an average of $65 for their customers, and they felt like there was like another 95 they could do in the next year, and blah blah blah. And so like if I said, hey, are you willing to spend $500 a year on technology? Let's even just do that really quick. 500 divided by 12. It's like $41 per unit a month on technology. Like absolutely, like that's nothing. But like also you like so much technology in prop tech sucks because either you're a tech person who knows nothing about real estate or you're a real estate person who knows nothing about tech. And like it's I don't know, it sucks. It's a weird industry in that way.
Well, I'm gonna make sure my marketing team knows to send an email that says it was great not seeing you at NAA. And we'll get your attention. Also, I wanted to talk on you said that you have really strong opinions on AI, and I know that you had tried to use some like at Canopy, and you don't blow a lot of smoke. So, Sunny, you are definitely more technical than Reed and I. We've been using whether it's machine learning or natural language or AI for basically since the founding of Digible, but it's sort of like flared up and down for us as far as hot buttons about the mismarketing of it all. But I'm curious, you also think a lot about the application. I like that you think about like what is the real outcome we're trying to achieve here versus like the way we're achieving it. So I don't know, I'm just teeing you up to say, tell me your thoughts on this AI boom.
I think it's the most impactful technology since the mobile phone or the internet. I think that in the same way that every American has a mobile phone in their pocket, and a number of them have like a $900 one, like you can see some sort of same adoption of AI. Like I don't know if that's everyone has an assistant. I don't know if that's every app has AI embedded into it. I think that is very plausible. And like for context for your viewers, because they don't know anything other than the 45 minutes of garbage I've spewed and hot takes that I try to be controversial on. Like I worked as a software engineer for 10 years. My co-founder like worked on a PhD in machine learning. He's been a software engineer even longer than I have. And like we thought that building Canopy GPT, which is like a chat focused thing on your data, was like slam dunk. And we just ran into a lot of problems with it. Like one problem that is the most obvious is accuracy. Like I don't think we're stupid. Like I always want to preface this is like people are seeing videos on Instagram and Twitter of like Elon Musk having a robot that like picks up your tomatoes and cuts them and makes you a sandwich. And like I'm telling you, this thing can't produce the most basic answers for stuff. Like it feels like there's a disconnect, right? And I think one of the hard things is even if you understand technology well, it's really hard to understand where AI is, call it correct and successful, and where it's not. And then that's just like a feature, but then the application of that is a whole another layer that is still something that's really unexplored. And so kind of going back to our example of Canopy for GPT, there's three things we ran into, which was very weird and shocked me. Like if you had asked me like a pre-postmortem, like what would go wrong, none of these three would have come up. Okay. Maybe except for accuracy, but like one was it was very expensive. Like calling the most sophisticated model, like call it one call a second, is way more expensive than people realize. And like you need to be very thoughtful of batching data. And yes, it gets cheaper. Like every month we see like a 25% reduction in OpenAI call cost, but like it's still a lot. If you really are screwing with it a lot, like I could spend over $100 an hour per user. Okay. So it's not as deflationary as people expected. And then the secondary thing is like it's called non-deterministic, meaning like you don't get the same answer twice, which can be good or bad. But like if you ask the same question, it can produce the absolute correct answer, and the second time it can produce the absolute wrong answer. And I have a bunch of examples of these, but like the one that I want to share that like because I still use AI every day and I use it to code is like if I put in like I want something from Monday to Friday, okay? I want it to be inclusive of Monday and Friday, the data, right? Sometimes when I post the SQL query for that and it makes a change or formats it, it comes back and doesn't include Monday. I didn't ask it to do anything in that. Like that part of the code was already written. There's all these random errors that it comes up with that are very subtle. And like, I'm very concerned with people making long-term business decisions, thinking this data is 100% accurate. And I don't want to be responsible for my customers making a $1 million, multi-million dollar decision that's compounded with bad data, right? And where I think it's very useful and accurate is like, it is very useful if you have an error threshold rate, like which is why it's good for alerts, to be honest with you. Like if I say, hey, like what's the probability this work order is going to lead to a potential lawsuit? I mean, who knows, right? But like if I can say it's like worth looking at and it has crossed the threshold, that's good. But I don't know, it's just so weird. Like the time we live in, like we've integrated a lot in our app. I think how we're integrating it is really smart, but like it's much more complicated than people realize. I don't know. Did I give away everything there, or did I go deep enough or not deep enough there?
That was helpful. I mean, you didn't call it a humanitarian tool like Excel or anything, but it was helpful to get your perspective.
Yeah.
Well, Reed, you have as an operator, meaning a business operator, Reed, you think a lot about it, but I'm just curious how your thoughts have changed, or if you line up with Sunny
on the AI.
Yeah, like as far as like, is it I mean, he's saying it's non-deflationary today, right? But obviously, I guess if on a long enough time horizon, you would hope it is, right? But I was just teeing you
Can
up
I
to
ask
see
a
if
question for you, if that's okay, David?
Sure.
Okay. I want to ask you a question, Reed. Do you think chat is the correct interface for an AI thing, or do you think it should live in the background and you should never interact with? Like, if you're going to pick two extremes of the world, one is talk to it and one is have it run in the background, which one do you think our industry and world is headed into?
Well, should versus where I think it's headed are two different things. So I think it's headed towards direct interface, and I think it should be primarily running in the background.
Cool. And why do you think it should be in the background, and why do you think it's headed towards the direct interface?
Because it's like everybody is, when I say everybody, I'm using generalizations and sweeping here, but people are obsessed with it right now, and they're building relationships with it. They are imagining it, and not all for good, right? There's a lot of the dystopian theories and anxiety around AI, but I think that's what's driving this kind of direct interface. Not to use funny movie analogies of her and things like that, but that this is where it's headed. The background then, I think, slows things down a bit in a good way as far as the relationship and sentiment that can be created when you're directly interacting with it. And on some level, when you talk about those alerts or some parameters or rails around it, it's more likely you're able to do that or provide for that if it's running in the background versus, my kid is just now starting to interact with GPT, asking it all sorts of questions. So I think that there's a little bit more opportunity for some governance running in the background, but I don't think that we're going to be able to slow this down. There's so much energy and excitement and enthusiasm about more the direct interface. So it's obvious. Obviously, I think it's at 3% of what Google searches are right now, but that's not going to slow down, in my opinion. And I've read a lot of articles about the dangers of that, meaning, again, the direct access and interface, and how much it could shape sentiment. And inadvertently, and then there's the conspiracy theories that some of that will be intentional, kind of in the global, realm, if you will.
Interesting. What about you, David? How do you feel? And I think one thing that's obvious, you kind of said your kids earlier, Reed, is it feels like some of the biggest consumers of this are actually children, right? And unintentionally and intentionally, like YouTube's entire recommendation algorithm is one of the most advanced AI topics right today, right? And how do you see this impacting your family, your day-to-day business? Where do you think it's headed?
Okay, I'll go first, and then Reed can go to his kids. For me, I think there's for what I would use. I really dislike chat. I don't. I was blown away that chat is like what took off, but I guess that shows like all people work differently, and um, it's funny because our engineering team and leadership and product team, they work very heavily like in a Notion doc, and they'll do kind of the Amazon 6 pages of whatever. And it's like Reed and I, our function has been more meetings. Like we're in meetings. Like I'm booked every half hour today, so I don't have time to read this 1,100 word or whatever Notion doc to get context on something. And so for me to then go to a chat doesn't, I don't, it's not working in my life today, but I love the idea of something running in the background and once in a while pinging me and being like, hey, whoa, did you know that you're about to run off a cliff or do the speed limit thing or whatever? Now, once in a while, I may want to interact with something, but for the most part, I would rather have some sort of assistant fire alarm at the moment of like, here's what you should be aware of or whatever, something you should do versus let me take time to sit down and explore because it's inconsistent to your point, Sunny. Like I don't know what I can depend on and what I can't depend on. So it's hard for me to say like, oh shoot, I should just go straight use these language models. But Reed, then to his second part of the question about your kids, I mean, obviously I'm a bit away of thinking from that.
Well, we haven't had Sterling on the show yet, but it's intended. That's my 10-year-old Sunny, and she has some strong opinions about AI, which David's gotten a kick out of. So she doesn't fully trust it. I love that about her. She's already a skeptic at 10 about the technology she's using. But one day I'll walk in and she's showing me what she's done with AI video platform. The next day she's telling me that the stuff creeps her out and that it's going to displace, humanity. So it's interesting, but I do know there are all sorts of applications of AI that are quickly drawing in my kids. And will increase their comfort level with it, and then might inadvertently desensitize their sensitivity or skepticism, which is where I get nervous. And so that's where I'm looking for some method, I guess, of management, measurement, governance, whatever you want to call it, which I know could be completely idealistic of me. But it seems more likely that would happen if you had it primarily running in the background versus directly in my kid's hand.
Sonny, let me ask from an engineering perspective. A lot of our challenge has been the dirty data that we get out of these management systems. And so obviously with your claim of being like the most integrated, a solution, I'm curious like about what your discovery has been there. And it could just, first of all, would you agree that there's a lot of dirty data? If not, that's great. I'd love to hear more. Secondly, which aspects have you witnessed have the worst kind of data that make it hard to make decisions on? And then how does that impact the application of AI?
Yeah, so I'll do that, and then I also want to come back on this question that I had asked you guys, if you don't mind.
Okay.
But I think firstly, garbage in, garbage out is the thing people say to us constantly, right? And when they say their data sucks, they're not relying. And I think that there's a kind of misunderstanding of what it means to have bad data. Like, it's absolutely the case that there's data that's inconsistent that makes no sense, right? That's a very small percentage of the data. It's not really the primary issue. Like, the systems have some guardrails, they're not great, but they do have some. I think where data becomes very challenging is like, I'll give you an example that's very applicable to you guys, right? You guys do a lot of marketing. The way every platform that's an ILS or a marketing platform pushes leads in and what they call a lead is so different, right? So like if you're looking at like property A and property B, and one has apartment list which pushes out 5,000 leads, and the other one pushes out only doesn't use apartment list, and only pushes out 500, you're like wondering like what is going on, right? But like at the end of the day, like this data is not comparable. And I find that it's most challenging when other companies integrate with PMS and what they push over. And also because so many people use so many different kinds of systems, it like pollutes a lot of that. And like there is serious issues with time lag and doing that. And like what we've had to do is build a lot of like safeguards on our own side. And like we have alerts for bad data. Like there's so many alerts for bad data we have. And they're simple. They're like this make ready date path, but no one marked it ready. Like someone do it because it can affect the marketing team. Like they're not going to market the unit until it's marked ready, right? And so I think what we've done well is like we've thrown away data we know is 100% wrong. Like the lease vacate date is before the lease start date. Just toss it, right? Like don't even parse it, right? Then we have stuff that sends alerts, and then there's stuff that we're like, this is wrong. Whatever, man. Try to do same properties. Try to like isolate it. Like you do what you do. But did I answer all your questions?
That's really helpful. And then obviously this applies to me on AI. Like if you need some of those controls in place before you want to layer something on top that's already kind of inconsistent. But I'll toss it back to you for your questions.
Yeah, I think one thing I wanted to say is like the reason I asked you guys this question is I think it's probably the most important question about AI and technology is like what will be the primary interface. And I have made the bet that the chat one is a fad. Okay. And the thing that our clients said when we built Canopy GPT, I talked about errors and deflationary. The real biggest issue was that no one used it. That was the number one issue. Like I had something that was working, it was functional, it was 80-90% correct, it did all this. Just people don't know what to ask, and like they're busy, and like even if it's not a meeting, like wouldn't you rather go like spend time with your kids or like your partner or like watching TV instead of like, okay, what do I ask this thing, like what is it, right? And so I think it's still a use case, but I think it's gonna be a low use case, kind of like I think there's other things that like there seem like a technology wave but there isn't, right? And the way we're going to approach AI, and I'm going to bet the company on it because I'm not contrarian enough, is like chat will be a small part of our app. It will still exist, but it will not be primary interface. But this idea of like a fire alarm, like we do AI generated narratives where we write the first narrative and we say, here's the questions we need you to answer about the narrative. Okay. We have AI generated alerts, which go through your data, ask the questions you would normally ask, and then like prompt someone to do something about it. Right. And we also do like call it the red alert. Like we flag work orders where we think there is serious insurance or structural damage, or there's repeating work orders that show an issue. And that's the kind of stuff we're doing. So like, to me, everyone in the world is already using Google. They're already using YouTube. They're already using Facebook. They're all using Instagram, Netflix. These are all already the biggest AI systems. And like this chat has reinvigorated the budget and like desire and need to bring that to B2B software. And that's where I think it's going to head. But, let's hope I'm right. So I have an enduring company in 10 years.
Well, I disagree with what you're saying. I don't know. I don't want to say GPT versus Google in this, but I'm going to say more like the fad you said that this is. And I'm going to speak as a sample size of one right now. But just recently, there was a couple different purchases I was making, home purchases, and went back to these websites and was really annoyed that I didn't have a chat bot and mechanism just chat. I didn't want to talk to somebody. I didn't want to send in an email and get back. I wanted immediate gratification, immediate answers. And that's part of what I think is driving this that you don't get today from Google. It's not a relationship. It's not, this right now we think in our industry a lot about these AI leasing agents. But where I'm going with this is if this technology doesn't advance and pick up where it left off with me, and that's the part of building a relationship. It's like, hey, I talked to you, Sunny, just a couple days ago, and now I'm going to talk to you again. And if it was able to say, I know this is Reed, this is the conversation we had, and we can start midstream. We don't need to start over. Those are just some of the small things that I fully expect to evolve and get way, way better. And then it is this real time, and we all know how much the world is looking for immediate gratification, but answers, conversations that right now I don't see that void being filled. And I think that's a huge opportunity, and is going to be, that will become more than a fad. Will it be the same clunky interface now where it's like this thing at the bottom of the screen that I like start typing in questions? I doubt it. And that's what I'm excited about, is what will the actual experience be? But the functionality of a chat is what I very much would argue is not a fad. I think it's going to build a lot of momentum over the next decade.
Yeah, and I think the best use case of LLMs is search, which is what you're describing, right? Like, I think search and semantic search is like a thing that people have been trying to solve for decades, and like this is a real solution to semantic search. I'm not disagreeing with that in any way, and I actually think Google is the most likely to get screwed over. I use ChatGPT way more than I use Google, like way more than I use Google. I think Google results are terrible now. Like, there's something so much better about getting. Firstly, I use voice chat a lot. Do you guys use the voice chat on the app?
I
use voice, but more, I'm not even going to say because I don't want everybody laughing at me, but go ahead.
Yeah, I love the voice to talk and have a conversation. And I also love saying, I made a GPT that says, like, listen to this, write it exactly as a transcript, and then after you're done, take the summary and email it to me and make sure it's under 150 characters, right? And like, I love that loop. I think that's a killer loop, right? But I just don't think every B2B problem reduces to search. Does that make sense? Like, and one question I have for you, Reed, because you are very bullish on search here, is search going to be something, or let's call it chat instead of search? Is it going to be a platform where everyone integrates their app into either OpenAI or Google or whoever has the best chat? Or will each company have their own unique chat that maybe has like a standard that operates between each other?
Well, that very last piece would be pretty critical, right? If there was the connectivity between, these different chat platforms or bots. Otherwise, then I think, and I'll use David's, recent kind of trending phrase here, but it is not winner take all. But I could see, similar to Google, and bets right now would be on OpenAI, I guess, to produce something that the globe, globally is used. But if we were able to have an underlying technology that a lot of bots, which also is part of this whole GPT conversation, were built on, that would integrate and connect, then I could see it going that route, but I don't have many examples of that happening. So I think that's way less likely, Sunny, that you're going to have different providers, suppliers, vendors, B2C, like, exchanges happening with all these different, that we're seeing some of that now, which is part of why I think this whole conversation is interesting. It's like, how much longer can this exist in real estate when you have Leah Pro, you have a lease, and I'm just referencing some of these, AI leasing agents, but is that possible, like, that we can sustain that before there is more like a GPT or an OpenAI, like, that is like, this is the real estate chat, technology, and it doesn't matter whether you're working through Elise or you're working through Leah Pro. So I don't know if that's a sufficient answer, but that's my gut reaction to that question.
Yeah, it's interesting. You guys know MuleSoft and Zapier? Do you know those two companies?
Yeah.
So for maybe the audience who may or may not know, like MuleSoft, universal API connector, everyone builds a MuleSoft. It's like on the enterprise side, like, how do you connect all these different systems? And Zapier is like consumer SMB, more focused, like hey, if something happens in one system, how does it affect another system? And it's kind of like a no-code API connector. It's like the two extremes on that side. And like, I'm just like, to your point here, David, or Reed, sorry. I don't know which one will be bigger in AI. And it's just so weird because like, I really don't think not enough people are talking about this. Like, it's such a huge platform shift. And like, there's so much more unknown about it. And like, I think where we kind of get left off and why I'm like I try to be proactive and like be annoying about it and like, try to get people on the other side is like, I think there's a lot more open questions than everything's been solved. And I think that's one of my frustrations with a lot of like, call it like technology optimists is like, oh, you're just going to connect your AI to this. Life is going to be amazing. So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
So, Reed, you weren't going to ask Sunny if AI is evil?
I would love for us all to answer this question. I'd be very curious.
Yeah, well,
All right.
I do not believe that it's evil. I think it's all about who's wielding the power, right? What it's aimed at, because there's countless applications already that I think it's for good and does great things. So how is this different than asking the question of, is the internet evil? To me, it's the same question. It's the next, call it transformative like technology, and it's got everything to do with who's wielding the power and where they're aiming it.
Yeah.
Go
for it.
I think just like nukes are kind of evil, AI is evil. Actually, I am going to say a real hot take here. The NSA and the US government is not doing enough to lock down and protect tech companies right now. There is way too much foreign espionage, and there's like every AI lab is spending hundreds of millions of dollars, and their IP is being stolen and being used by oppressive governments, and like also like these companies are being ripped off. Like where like the Manhattan Project was like locked down, right? And we're spending like in terms of dollars and cents something equivalent with potentially a very similar outcome in terms of like super intelligence. Like if super intelligence comes to be, I have no idea what will happen. It will be the most ridiculous thing. And for everyone who doesn't know what super intelligence is like the system gets so smart that it learns from itself. Like it doesn't need to learn from humans anymore. Like it's able to process and create new ideas on its own. And like could be really far out, could be really soon, who knows? But like I'm very irritated by the lack of, call it, potential corporate espionage that's at play here.
I've been sitting in my podcast room too long that my freaking light went off.
Yeah, I was wondering what happened to David. I was like, wow, the AI got to the Terminator is going to kill him before it happens.
Intelligence came for me, Sunny.
Yeah, this guy.
I like that. I like your take. I'm kind of with I guess a little bit with both of you, but my take is it's not evil. I'm all about growth, and growth is change. And so AI to me is just change, which equals growth, and that's a good thing. So I think there's going to be, as there is with any shift, whether it's the plow or the combustion engine or what have you, there's going to be some things that change, that disrupt individuals, that are upsetting and cause hardships. But overall, for society, and going back to Sunny's humanity, I think it's a good thing because we need to keep growing. So I view it as a good thing.
Yes.
Well, Sunny, is there anything else you want to get off your chest before we let you go?
I just want to say thank you. You guys have a great show. I appreciate that you came here and let me spew garbage on it. I'm sorry for that. But I really enjoyed it. And I also like, Reed, that you didn't agree with me on everything. I think it's great. Like, I think, the only way we make a better world is when people talk about what they think and kind of poke holes in it. And so I've really enjoyed speaking with both of you from an intellectual perspective. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. And Sunny, if people want to learn more about Canopy or get in touch, what's the best way?
You can email me at sunny@canopyanalytics.com, or you can go to our website. And I'm also a chronically online person. So if you hit me up on LinkedIn, text, email, you stalk me on WhatsApp, I'll be there.
Was okay. Umbrella Analytics available, or was it Canopy from the get?
It was Canopy from the get, and the reason it was Canopy from the get was like I couldn't come up with it. Was the first name I came up with, and then I went through like a 4-hour like maybe longer naming exercise where you like I read a book on naming or something stupid like that, and I was like, at the end of it, I was like, man, I just like Canopy. It's the forest. It's where everything lives. It's everything kind of sits underneath it. And I was sitting in bed and I couldn't sleep, and I was like, man, this domain's not available. What do I do? And I was like, what if I called it Canopy Analytics? And it was available, and I bought it at like 3 a.m.
That's nice. I'm thinking, Reed, if he had just read 0 to 1 recently to his naming session, he would have just called the company Zero. Thank you. All right, Reed, you had one other thing you wanted to say there.
No, I'm good. I appreciate it too, Sunny. I mean it wholeheartedly. I think you're great for the industry. Bring some amazing perspective and obviously some great technology, and love all the contrarian thoughts and ideas you shared with us. So keep doing your thing, man.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys.